Welcome to Impact and Influence, the podcast for current and emerging leaders to build on leadership capability, sustainability, and purpose. This series opens the door to what's possible to build a life in leadership by design, not by default. Brought to you by Regrowth Consultancy, powered by Flick It Over. Flick It Over is a leading electronic software platform. Flick It Over provides industry-specific solutions to improve process, client experience, and efficiencies. Make your document delivery and workflow seamless with Flick It Over.
Welcome to our next guest, Carlos Boustany, the director of the Mark Carlisle Group. Carlos, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks so much for having me.
You are here to talk about probably one of the most talked about topics in real estate at the moment, and that is all of the changes to the AML legislation.
Yeah, well, here I am, and it's not often compliance people get off, jump on some podcasts, talk about compliance, so I'll try and keep everyone awake.
We will absolutely, because we were just talking in the lead up to this, and yes, we're not going to bore you with the details of the legislation, but Carlos is here today to essentially help us break down what the requirements are. July 1 is going to be here before we know it. And we were just talking about, what do you think? How many businesses do you think that are actually prepared for this or not? And your answer probably didn't surprise me, but what was it?
Ooh, I'd say less than half with the conversations we've had.
Yeah, so less than half of us are ready for it. Let's start from the very beginning, a little bit just for context and why you're an expert in this space, your background and I guess career overview.
Yeah, awesome. So I think for the last 15 years, I've been in multiple financial crime, compliance and operational roles with some international organizations as well as some large domestic institutions. Most recently, it's really important for compliance functions to work closely with operational teams and staff on the ground to get that full visibility of how things actually work and then overlay the compliance on top of that. So that's an area that I'm quite passionate in. And yeah, obviously with the new reforms coming up, there should be some people that might need some help.
I think so. We'll get to that later on. But what are the key requirements for real estate businesses that we need to be aware of as business owners?
Yeah, absolutely. I think first things first, enrollment opened, I believe, end of March, 31 March. So enrolling with AUSTRAC, but however, prior to that, there's a few key things that you would need to do. And heavily people focused. So appointing an anti-money laundering compliance officer, completing your business risk assessment, identifying risks that are actually applicable to your business, might not be applicable to the shop down the road or the next suburb.
Yeah.
That's your first couple of key steps. Post that, obviously then enrolling with AUSTRAC, and then your risk assessment is that foundational to everything that you're going to do. So that's going to drive your program and policies and procedures, how you're going to execute these requirements.
Sounds like a lot.
It is plenty. It is plenty. Like I like to almost chunk them down, and without using the acronyms that the regulator produces, it can get a bit confusing, especially when we're talking about 5 kinds of due diligence. So
yeah, what did you just say to me? There was like 600 pages of legislation.
I think there's like 400 pages or something like that in the Act and a few hundred more in the rules. So there's plenty there. But what I like to do and what we like to do as a business is simplify what's required. Initially, outside of your programs, policies, training, frameworks and governance, understanding who your customer is, the risk of that customer or potential risks to that customer is your first step that's what they like to call initial customer due diligence. And then from a real estate perspective, your ongoing customer due diligence. So monitoring that behavior throughout the life of the relationship. So when they sign on to sell a property, looking at different behaviors, making an assessment with the information that you've collected. And then if anything unusual pops up, making a bit more of a deeper dive and assessment in if anything's reportable via an SMR to AUSTRAC. So that's a suspicious matter report.
So is this just relating to sales transactions or property management as well?
Sales transactions.
Just sales,
yes,
yeah. I just wanted to clear that up. It is like, obviously we've got 2 trusts essentially in every business, but it is just the sales transactions.
Yeah, it's predominantly focused around sales. There are certain carve-outs for when things get brought into scope, but probably don't need to go through them in depth today. But yeah, it's predominantly the buying and selling of real estate that's in scope.
So I'm sitting here as a business owner today and I haven't done anything at all and I'm starting to panic. What do I do first?
Depending on the type of business and the size of your business, AUSTRAC have released a starter kit for real estate agents. So if your business is eligible for that, it really is a fantastic resource, and it's the end-to-end policy documentation, material that you need to execute your requirements internally and in-house.
And so what's the eligibility for that?
I believe it's around staff numbers and size and complexity of your business.
Okay,
so
great.
if you're not run of the mill, but if you've got a consistent customer base, you're domestic, Maybe I think it's less than 10 or 15 staff.
Okay.
Might be
so
eligible.
We're talking smaller scale businesses.
Smaller scale businesses.
They can get that toolkit essentially to help them get set up.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the first thing that I'd be doing tomorrow if I haven't implemented anything. And that's going to inform your decision-making process, whether you might need external help or not.
Okay, so I'm a bigger business. I've got multi-locations.
Yes.
Then what do I do?
Yeah. Okay. So if you haven't started as a bigger business, I'd get cracking identifying key people within the business that you could almost utilize and leverage their skill set to potentially become an AML compliance officer, or look at hiring externally for an AML compliance officer.
What skill set do I need? Like, as a business owner, where should I be looking?
Like traditionally, compliance folk, some of the best ones come from operations. Some of the best ones come from, out and out compliance teams and functions. It really depends. And what I'd be looking for, first things first, in an AML compliance, they've got the relevant skill set. They understand what's required from a regulatory perspective. And secondary to that, almost of equal importance, they understand how a business works. Critically important for someone to then apply, legislative requirements to existing processes and work out what's missing from these processes to meet compliance without reinventing the wheel.
And that's where you step in as well, because I am going to give your business a plug.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. So again, this is a lot. This is a lot of change and a lot of legislation that we need to be across. And at Regrowth, we're all about working with the experts that can support your business. So what function do you then and your team play?
Our main function at the moment is advisory and implementation. So working with larger companies and businesses, building out the program and policies, but more importantly, informing senior stakeholders within that business on what's required and their accountabilities. So they need to have oversight over AML program performance, and they're ultimately accountable for that program's performance as well. Starting there, educating the LT of that business, and then working with the teams layer by layer on what the impacts are, what the processes are, what's the delta, what's the top up, where can we meet compliance without reinventing the wheel and throwing in some absolute curveballs.
Yeah.
There will be some in AML, there will be definitely, and some of them are going to be new processes for the business. But ultimately our advisory arm work with people on the ground all the way up to LT, and we actually implement from go to O, your AML compliance program. And on an ongoing basis for entities that require support consistently, and they might not have the right people in the right roles, or someone needs that extra support from a compliance perspective, we work with them on a monthly basis as well.
Interesting.
Yes.
I think your phone might be ringing after today's episode. So tell me, in your experience, where do leaders probably underestimate the AML risk?
Yeah, look, and that's a really good question. In multiple industries that I've worked in, it's, you're pushed to market. What's new products or what's new sales tactics, but underestimating the financial crime impact behind that and not necessarily addressing via risk assessment first, and understanding your risks for that business is key. New product, new process, risk assessment. Is it going to work for us? Yes or no?
So if I roll out new technology in my business, I then need to do a risk assessment.
Not necessarily a risk assessment on that tech, but your overall risk assessment's often overlooked in terms from senior management on what the actual applicable risks are to the business.
Can you give me an example?
There's a couple that have been in the media.
Are you not allowed to give me an example?
Yeah, no, I don't think I probably could give you a couple of examples.
I thought I'd try.
No, look, so, and what I mean by that, and it's not overlooking the risk, but not completely understanding where the holes are.
Yeah, okay.
That's your first and foremost. And then secondary to that is the complexity. And it does take some time operationally to get through the work, especially when it comes to like verification, identifying people if they're politically exposed, and then, reviewing transaction monitors, reviewing customers for unusual activity. That whole process needs to be understood from leadership teams and senior management to adequately support their staff. Tech alone will not solve everyone's problems.
Okay, but there is tech that can help?
Absolutely. Yeah, there's some fantastic tech providers that help with, especially your initial customer due diligence processes. However, if you give a learner a Ferrari, it's not going to end well. So it's about the people in my eyes. And first and foremost, providing that support, that structure, safe spots for your team is going to be really important, and empowering escalation. When they think something's wrong, they should have no questions about coming straight to you with a problem that they've identified.
So new listing, we obviously have to verify ID. Is that part of the process that we need to be now considering taking another step?
Yeah, 100%. So upon a listing, you'll, liaise with the customer, grab their ID. However, from that point, there are certain requirements where you might need to ask more questions to that customer. However, you need to, I'd say, mold them into your existing process because you don't want a lengthy, pretty poor customer experience.
Yes.
Not only is it verification, but it's also what they call politically exposed person checks, which...
Yeah, you mentioned that before.
Yeah. So AUSTRAC and most regulators quite heavy on what they call foreign PEPs, who are to be treated as high-risk customers. And if you've got a high-risk customer, you need to take extra steps to be comfortable with that customer's risk to your organisation. And that's through the form, and you're going to love this one. It's another acronym, ECDD, Enhanced Customer Due Diligence. So there are those processes that kick in for higher risk cohorts of customers.
I guess, where do you see things go wrong?
Look, yeah, I think not investing in people is the main one, and then not educating your staff and giving them that breadth and getting the right people into your business is quite tricky, especially early on. Over-reliance on tech. Tech will only get you so far, but tech is brilliant as well. Again, accountabilities, leadership team oversight. You really want the decision makers in that business on top of financial crime risk and working collectively with the teams responsible for executing those risks.
So it's an understanding from the ground up of what the requirements are, so that it's not reliant on one person.
Spot on. It's. I think you hit the nail on the head. It's top down compliance culture, and then understanding ground up. Exactly how it gets executed across your business.
We're not just ticking boxes here.
No, absolutely not. It's not tick box. No matter who comes out with, it's super simple. You can make it simple, but it's definitely not a tick box. It's a cultural change as opposed to we need to do X, Y, Z because of X, Y, Z said so. It's actually not scrutinizing your customer base, but, that extra level of review and care. Ultimately, it's to protect the wider community and your business as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And we were talking about the crossover between like the privacy legislation and AML and all that sort of stuff. So like it does feel like a lot. And I think you said something, I'll probably get this wrong, but it was like, and you stole it, so I'm stealing it from you. Yeah,
that's good. As long as it's said it's stolen, it's good. It's not mine. It's not original content. So
data's the new asbestos. Is that what you said?
Yeah, I heard it at a conference and I thought, what a line. That is unbelievable. So the person who said that, well done.
We love data in real estate. We love at Regrowth. It's very much around, there's so much gold in data and utilizing that data. Where's the crossover with the legislation?
Look, there's plenty of crossover with legislation and processes as well. From a privacy perspective, you should be adhering to the privacy laws, and AML has wouldn't say separate privacy requirements, but they do overlap.
Yeah.
And you need your record keeping is fundamental to any AML program. So working out where the crossovers are, exact timeframes you need to hold data for, critically important. I think working out the crossover from a data perspective and then ironing out those processes and retention periods for your business. So obviously with AML, you need to retain data.
Considerations. You've mentioned a number of times the training of your team is imperative to the rollout of these changes. Mm-hmm. What does that look like if I had a team that I'm like, I know I've got the right people, but how do I educate them? And what does that look like to ensure that we're ready for July 1? Yeah,
look, outside of your general awareness training, which I think a lot of real estate agents would go through via CPD, you need some role-specific training, particularly for your AML compliance officer, your staff that are responsible for executing the AML processes. It's really important that you take them on the journey early and not just go, here you go, here's your process, and we can just train you on the process. But I think understanding the why we're doing it.
Yeah. So that would be salespeople who are signing agency agreements. That would be admin teams who are helping to process those agreements and compliance around that. You've obviously got your compliance officers and your directors.
Yeah.
Is there anyone that I've missed that would be in that process?
Well, I think it's a really good question, right? Because it's going to come down to how you structure your team.
Of course.
There might be structural changes and, your operational staff might need to, start executing certain requirements where they never had to do it in the past. You might want to take it off the sales folk to do it, but the sales folk have responsibilities to identify certain things through their customer interactions and
yeah, that's a
feed them
challenge,
through.
isn't it? Because,
Yeah.
you know, being a salesperson, compliance is not our strength. And
It
we
will
just,
be.
well, this is the challenge, right? Like we just want to get the agreement signed and we want to get the deal done.
Yeah.
And so it's having that team behind us, because let's be really let's be real. We can, yes, the education is important. Yes, we know the responsibility, but also how do we support the salespeople out there?
Yeah.
Is that a fair statement to make?
100%. And yeah, to the point earlier, it comes down to process simplification. You might not want salespeople doing certain processes, but they are part of that journey and the process because, you know, it is top down and ultimately financial crime is everyone's responsibility.
So salespeople listening, you can't just bury your head in the sand and say, oh, that's someone else's job. I'm not responsible. Is that a clear enough message?
100%. And look, it is a change up to ways of working. However, you know, when you think about community impacts and impacts to your own organization as well, you know, you want to be on that front line and you're often in the best position to identify things that might warrant further review.
Carlos, can you tell me what the penalties are for non-compliance with the AML regulations for real estate agents?
Firstly, they're significant. So you've got civil penalty orders, infringement notices, and AUSTRAC may request that you appoint external auditor over your AML program, which is quite expensive. It could be expensive.
Yeah.
And ultimately, once you're held accountable for that, you know, obviously you've got reputational impacts to consider as well.
Absolutely.
And wider community impacts.
What patterns do you see that consistently go wrong within businesses?
I think first and foremost, it's that senior stakeholders, senior leadership teams not taken on the AML journey early and fully aware of how their business execute those requirements and aware of the risks funneling up the chain. Getting on top of that early and that commitment to delivering great risk outcomes. Not always not there from the start, but it's usually through a lack of understanding and priority.
And would it be fair to say, and I'm going to come across very harsh when I say this, but it's like the response that you've got your compliance manager in place, but as a business owner, that's not enough. It's not just like hope that they do what they need to do. The responsibility is overseeing that and taking on, I suppose I'm saying responsibility again, but taking that on to make sure that consistency is process is there, and that stops with the business owner.
Yeah, 100%. It starts and stops with the business owner, top-down compliance culture. And
They're the ones getting the fine, right?
Yeah, exactly. They're potentially, yes. And then having to deal with external auditors, going through your program, how you execute things. The cost of remediation is quite significant compared to the cost of getting it right to start with. Whenever
there's risk with penalties and those sorts of things, I always think of insurance, and we were talking cyber insurance earlier, and I know you're not an insurance expert. I think even more so now with all of these changes in legislation, cyber insurance, if you don't have it within a business, would be absolutely imperative.
Absolutely. And the more data, obviously, that you're going to hold throughout the AML processes, I think cyber insurance would be appropriate. It's a big change and you will be holding a lot more data.
How does that affect with the data that we're allowed to hold in terms of the privacy legislation? So like, for example, we don't hold a copy of someone's driver's license. Is that something that we're supposed to, is that affected by AML?
No, it shouldn't. Like there's certain components that you need to retain data for, like unique identifier numbers. You need to retain that.
Gotcha.
I don't believe you need to retain physical copies of ID.
So we are aligned on those sorts of things with the two legislation.
Yeah. If not, I'll send an update.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect. Anything to, I guess, wrap us up? Any top tips, rapid fire, that you think is relevant for listeners today that they need to be aware of before the 1st of July?
Yeah, look, I think be aware of your own accountabilities as like a leadership team or an owner of business. Ultimately, the buck starts and stops with yourself. Invest in your people, streamline your processes, and get cracking if you haven't started already.
Great tips. And we will put Carlos's contact details, if that's okay with you, in the show notes, and perhaps some links to, the AUSTRAC information and those sorts of things, so that it's easy for everyone to access. But time's ticking, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's crunch time is coming.
Awesome. Carlos, thanks for joining us.
Not a problem. Thank you.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of Impact and Influence. Click follow to get notified about future episodes. Leaving a review helps others find the podcast. And to learn more about our courses, our study tours, conferences, keynote topics and our services, or how simply we might be able to help support you in taking you to places you never thought possible, please visit regrowthkyliewalsh.com. Impact and Influence, brought to you by Regrowth Consultancy, powered by Flick It Over. Flick It Over is a leading electronic software platform. Flick It Over provides industry-specific solutions to improve process, client experience and efficiencies. Make your document delivery and workflow seamless with Flick It Over.